It isn't because of the baby, it's because of the other baby.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, welcome. We're now continuing in Orot HaTeshuvah, the lights of repentance. And we are now on chapter 4, subsection 9, so Perek Daled, and subsection Tet 9. Just want to remind you that in the last subsection, we're talking about Rav Kook's observation. I would say it's somewhere between a prediction and observation, that at the beginning of the process of redemption, there's going to be a revolt, a spiritual revolt of heresy among the Jewish people. The reason I say it's a combination of prediction and observations because already in Rav Kook's lifetime, unfortunately, it was the reality, right? The Jewish people began to rebel against our own holy Torah already in the 18th century, really, and certainly in the 19th century, gaining steam. And we're talking about all the different isms that the Jewish people wandered into, sometimes led, right, of substitutes for Judaism, right, of Torah, substitutes for Torah, God forbid. And not only is it an observation, right, it's full throttle in Rav Kook's lifetime, but this is also predicted by the prophets. Okay, that's the bad news, right? But the good news is what Rav Kook is going to describe, because all these analyses that we're doing here are about Teshuvah, returning, right? So we're going to learn today, beginning this long chapter. This is very long, this particular next section. We're going to be learning about what it's going to look like, the process of recovery from the period of rebellion against the Torah, of rejection of Torah, of scorning Torah, of mocking Torah, of abandoning Torah. And the even better news is that we're living in the middle of that right now, which is an amazing thing. We're sort of at the kind of end of the last gasps of rebellion against Torah, and very much in the beginning of the return. I know that sometimes it's easy to slip into kvetching, complaining. It's not directed at anybody here. Okay. But if we open our eyes, you don't have to open them very wide, even just at such an early hour, just a little bit, right? Didn't have enough coffee yet, to see the amazing teshuvah, the amazing return that's going on. And Rav Kook is going to describe it in detail about how it will manifest itself. The amazing thing is in Rav Kook, see, this part, the good part, Rav Kook is purely predicting from his vantage point, because there was very little teshuvah in his lifetime, right? Rav Kook is 1865, 1920, 1935, right? It's all rejection in his lifetime. There's no Baal Tshuva movement, right? That came later. That came in our lifetime. It's, that's our, right? And moving forward, right? So
When was the massacre?
1929.
Oh, that first.
No, that's during his life, right? He died in 1935. Right. So the good news Rav Kook didn't see, though he actually, because of the sort of the complexity of how the good news will express itself, even the bad news, Rav Kook saw the good news in the bad news. You can imagine such a thing. Okay, so I just want to, in order to frame this discussion, quote from another passage of Rav Kook. Remember that Rav Kook didn't write this part as a book, right? These are all assembled notes from his spiritual diaries. So in order to understand it better, there are people who have gone through all of Rav Kook's writings, and by comparing what Rav Kook is saying here with what Rav Kook said elsewhere, you can sort of put together a more coherent picture. So I'm just going to read to you from a footnote from Rav Filber. Rav Filber is one of the most important, I quote a lot from different people. Rav Aviner, who was a great student of the teachings of Rav Kook. There's a Rav Filber, who I haven't mentioned too much, but I personally use him a lot, who has been a great disseminator of the teachings of Rav Kook. So Rav Filber, in his footnotes here on this chapter, he quotes from another work of Rav Kook called Orot, which a lot of Rav Kook's books are called lights of something. So we're learning Orot Teshuvah, lights of repentance. There is a big book called Orot, lights. Actually, it's a small book. I'm sorry. There's another book called Orot HaKodesh, Lights of Holiness, which is a big book, multi-volumed. But there's a small work called Orot, which is really powerful book. It's too bad we don't have here. Maybe someone, if they're in a mood sometime, to donate a book. There's a really powerful English version of it that's been published, of the work Orot. As a matter of fact, someone else just published this last year a different English translation with notes. So there's been two versions that have come out. Rabbi Batzal Naor published a translation of Orot Lights maybe 15 years ago. And then there's a rabbi in New York who just put out another one, another version. So Orot, that's something to put on your to-do list to learn that book. That's a very powerful book, Orot. In any case, Rav Kook says in Orot the following, and you don't have this in front of you, so I'll just read it to you. So Rav Kook says the following: Shehashalva hagashmit shetavo lechelek me'uma, that the kind of material tranquility which will come to part of the nation, sheyidmu sheba'u lematratam kula, they'll think they've arrived. You see, Rav Kook is saying that part of the rebellion against Torah will be the perception that the Jewish people have accomplished their goals, or at least either collectively or personally. So for American Jews, it meant we've arrived. You know, my son is a doctor, you know, lives in the suburbs. He's got a wife and 1.5 children. He changed his name from Goldstein to Smith. That's, we've arrived, right? Prominent, distinguished member of the general community.
In the club, the country club.
Member of the country club, right? We've arrived, right? Donates millions of dollars to the Democratic Party. We've truly arrived, right? Okay. So that's on a kind of in an American context, the sense of we've kind of arrived. Rav Kook uses the expression that because we've arrived at this shalva gashmit, kind of on a material level. So that would be in terms of American experience, but Rav Kook also is talking about in terms of political Zionism, right? That this is the same idea, but on a different level, right? In Israel, it's not so much of chicken in every pot and a Mercedes in every driveway. That may be more appropriate to certain parts of American Jewry, not a KI. Yeah, we're still working on that part. But Larry has a couple of Mercedes in his driveway. But for in the Israeli context, it's more the sense of the Zionist movement and its successes, right? Rav Kook didn't live to see the Jewish state, but he lived to see a very dramatic expansion of the Jewish presence in the land of Israel. And for our perspective, people have such a short historical memory. They somehow think that there's this country called Israel. It's been there forever, and it's a powerful country and economically flourishing, etc. That's a miracle, right? 100 years ago, there was no such thing on any level. So, but if you grew up with that, then you kind of feel also like, oh, we've arrived. We're a nation among nations, right? And we have an army, and it's a country, and that you don't need Judaism anymore, right? That's this kind of sensibility that you get. It's hard for us to imagine, because you sort of have to grow up in Israel to imagine just how tempting and seductive the idea is of, well, I don't really need Torah, because why? I just had a really interesting experience this last Friday night. It's last Shabbat evening, so I was invited to somebody's home for dinner, and it was almost all Israelis at this particular home. And what was interesting about it is that I don't think anybody in that home was raised with real intense, observant Jewish life. Some say some traditional and had strengthened, and others with nothing. And there was actually one of the guests there was a visitor from Israel who's visiting his sister, who lives in Sacramento, probably lived in Sacramento for a long time. And the brother that was just visiting from Israel made this comment. Didn't seem to be a religious person. He sort of was looking around the table, and he made the comment that a lot of Israelis come to the United States and they become religious in the United States. It's kind of ironic, right? But it's understandable. It's very understandable, right? Because what happens is that there's this kind of seductive and deceptive falling into the trap of feeling Jewish enough because you live in Israel, right? The calendar is kind of a Jewish calendar there. The holidays are kind of part of your everyday existence, kind of just the way you feel the rhythms of the calendar. And people feel like they've arrived, right? Like that's Jewish enough, right? And so that's Rav Kook is saying, that a portion of the nation is going to arrive at a certain type of sufficient material security and prosperity with just enough of Judaism, not very much, right? Just a tiny sprinkle. It's Jewish enough, right? And then that's it. And no need to be particularly involved at any intense level in the details of Jewish life. Of course, what I just described now is very much now in Israel. It was much worse not too long ago, when it wasn't enough just that Israel is Jewish enough, but that there was actually a sense of Judaism being passé, right? The more socialist, like hostile elements of some of the founding pioneers of Israel.
Do you think it had anything to do with the fact that the IDF became so strong so fast, and they realized that, hey, we can do this on our own strength?
Yeah, that's a very good point that Zev is making. There's so many different elements of the kind of seductive, this kind of collective delusional state that the Jewish people came in. The challenges of Israel, right? I mean, it's redemptive, but it's also a spiritual challenge. I remember, my first time going to Israel was between the 6-Day War and the Yom Kippur War. Right. And that was a period of very heady success. I mean, the 6-Day War is an unbelievable miracle. But instead of feeling gratitude, there was a sense among many Jews in Israel of, oh, we're cool, And I remember seeing bumper stickers when I first came to Israel. That was right before the Yom Kippur War in 1973, the summer of 1973. And there are bumper stickers, Yisrael Betach B'Tzahal, Israel trusts in the Israeli army. That's supposed to be a verse, which says Yisrael Betach B'Hashem, Israel trusts in the Lord, right? So what an unbelievable, Boker Tov, what an unbelievable distortion there. And of course, maybe from a spiritual level, the Yom Kippur War was supposed to be kind of a wake-up call, which maybe on a certain level, in a very painful way, actually had some positive effect, though in a complicated and traumatic manner. So it's a very good point that you're making. So that's what Rav Kook's point when he says that there'll come a kind of not tranquility is not the right word. What's it called when it's a sort of bad form tranquility, when you're kind of like complacent? God bless you. Thank you. A kind of complacency. That's a good word. That's exactly what he means, because he says shalva gashmit, a kind of complacency as a result of the fact that this sort of feeling that we've arrived.
Sounds better in Hebrew.
It's better than what?
It sounds better in Hebrew.
Okay, complacency sounds good. So in any case, Rav Kook goes on there and says that is going to taktina tanishama. It's going to diminish our souls. That kind of complacency. That's going to diminish the souls. V'yavo yamim asher tomar ein behem chayfetz. And because of that, there's going to become a time when we won't feel any spiritual desire. Spiritual thirst will diminish. That we're not going to feel this desire for lofty and holy values and ideals. And our spiritual state will plummet and sink. So that's going to be the challenge, and that's going to happen. And of course, we see it, right? Both in the American scene, in its way, and in the Israeli scene, in its way. That's the bad news. But then Rav Kook says there in Orot, Ad asher yavo sar v'yehafech ma'apecha. A big storm is going to come. It's going to turn everything upside down. There's going to be a revolution. Ma'apecha means revolution. Lafoch means to turn things upside down. V'yera'eh ba'alil ki chosin Yisrael hu b'kodesh olamim b'or Hashem b'torato. And people will see in a very obvious way that the only true strength of Israel, related to what Zeph was saying, is not the Israeli army, but it is in the eternal holiness of the light of God and His Torah. That's going to happen, and people are going to see it in a very obvious way. There's going to be a revolution. And Rav Kook in this chapter is going to talk about different ways that we're going to arrive at this realization that we haven't arrived, that the fact that we have some kind of material success is not what it's about. And that complacence that we have slipped into and sunk into is going to be shattered. And we're going to realize that only until we turn to the holiness of Hashem and His Torah, that only there will we finally have, as it were, arrived. Now, what are the different aspects of that return? That's what we're going to be learning about in this particular chapter. Now, let's start reading this chapter. We'll be able to read a couple sentences, and then we'll continue tomorrow. Mitzdadim shonim tavo v'titkale hatshuva. This tshuva, this return that is going to happen, Rav Kook says. And remember, it's not really happening in his days, but it is happening in our days. So what's amazing about this is we're in such a great position because we can look back at this written so long ago and we can say, wow, we don't really believe there's prophecy anymore. But this is about as close as it comes. Rav Kook had this ability to close to prophecy. Okay? That the revelation of tshuva, of return, will happen in various ways. Now here's the one way. Echad miyuchad mitztadeh ele yeh atzar al halbon shene'elav haruach hagadol atzur b'chol ma shehinchilunu avotenu she'ein shur luzo uchvodo. One of those ways is that we will experience a tremendous pain over the disgrace that the shame that the great spirit which is stored up within the heritage that our forefathers have bequeathed us has been subjected to. That there's no way of imagining and evaluating how great is the glory of our heritage, and it's been despised. Right? So kind of what Rav Kook is saying in more simple language is, can you imagine that I just, last night, I was tired. I had drove my wife to the airport in San Francisco, and then basically all the driving, and I burned out my brain. So instead of like doing work, I was YouTubing. I'm sure you don't know what that is. Yeah. So I happened to watch this YouTube. It was a interview by Barbara Walters. Remember her? With the Trump family.
Oh, yeah. Call him the 1%er when she's
Yeah. So it was interesting. In any case, they interviewed the children. So these children they've grown up in like unbelievable luxury, where they've had they're extremely wealthy. So imagine that this didn't happen in their case, at least in the interview. Imagine like you're given a treasure beyond imagination and you despise it. You know, your parents bequeathed to you this incredible treasure and you think it's junk, not even worth your attention. That's like a material example, or, mashal. It's just an example, right? That's what we have, but much, much more valuable than the Trump fortune. We have the Holy Torah. And what did we do with it? It's been thrown into the gutter, trampled upon, and despised and viewed as worthless. So Rav Kook says one of the ways that the whole tshuva movement is going to happen is people are going to feel the pain of, imagine the parent who bequeathed this fortune to their children and the children reject it, the pain that the parent would feel. We're going to feel the pain that this incredible heritage that we've been given, this treasure that we've been given, has been subjected to such being despised. I'll end with one sentence. There's one of the manifestations of this is there's a famous rabbi in Israel. He was an actor, super famous. He was an actor in films that were not very kosher. And he returned and became a rabbi. And he wrote a book, and the book in English, it's called We Was Robbed. I think that's actually the title, like was robbed. We was robbed, W-U-Z. We was robbed. That's exactly what Rav Kook is saying. Uri Zohar. Uri Zohar was a famous actor and comedian and playboy, whatever he was. Yeah, and no, that's somebody else. And Uri Zohar he did tshuva, and he became a rabbi about tshuva. And he wrote this book, We Was Robbed. And it's all about coming to the realization of this incredible treasure, and we was robbed, that the spirit of rejection of Torah and scorning and mocking, and finally realizing that, and the deep pain of that will be part of the process of tshuva. Now, Rav Kook tomorrow will go into more detail, and we'll see how this relates to our own lives. But this is sort of the beginning of this aspect of the process of tshuva, and we'll discuss this more tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.